just wanted to briefly talk about what's been going on in England with regards to the recent benefits cut in PIP. What's it called? Personal Independence Payment, what it's called. And you've got universal credit, social security, basically, disability payments. I think really this is probably one of the most disastrous moves this current Labour Party has made yet, really. It was bad enough taking money away from the elderly, people that have paid into this, most of them have paid into the system all their lives, or most of their lives, adult lives. But then, you know, scapegoat and take advantage of already incredibly vulnerable people. It's just, to me, there's I think there's no going back from that. You can't claim to be a party of the underclass, you know, the downtrodden working class, and you know, the working man and woman in the street kind of thing, and then tax them to high hell, and essentially make their lives more and more miserable, not protecting businesses, you know, incentivizing people to basically leave the country, especially people with a lot of money, and people with, you know, a great input into the economy, entrepreneurs, and you know, people with a bit of wealth, and people that have started companies and businesses, and it's just, to me, it's I personally think it's the nail in the coffin, really. It's the final straw. It's really, in my opinion, the end of Labour. And I think, personally, once we get through these local elections in May, and we see that Labour essentially get pretty much obliterated, that, in my opinion, that will be the beginning of the end for Labour. Once they see that they're losing support massively to, especially to reform, probably some to the Conservatives, some to the Lib Dems, and smaller parties, Greens, maybe even UKIP as well. I think that will be the point where I think there'll be, at the very least, there'll be a call to get the current Prime Minister Keir Starmer to essentially have a resign as PM, or there'll be a vote of no confidence in him. I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see some quite significant resignations after May, in May or after May, whenever. I think really, you know, I knew anyway before Labour got into power that they were on borrowed time. You know, they'd be lucky if they got to see through their full term in office, and you know, and they probably will somehow. They'll try and cling on for the next few years, just scraping by somewhere. But I think when the time comes to get rid of these bastards, because that's what they are, just slimy, greedy, immoral, unethical pieces of shit, basically, like all vast majority of people that get into government. I just have no trust. I have no confidence in politicians or government anymore. I had very little to begin with, but just there's just too many snakes. There's too many chameleons. There's too many. There's just too much self-interest involved in it all. Too much corruption that's allowed to go on, and there's just no real people with any integrity, self-respect, and any kind of morality in government. It's just there. It's just a self-serving, money-creating organisation. That's all the government is. They don't care about people struggling. They don't care about people that have serious mental health problems and actual disabilities. But they have to. Every time I see a politician speak on the news and in interviews, on YouTube, whatever, it's just always the same thing. They're always sticking to their very carefully curated position and language, and almost kind of word for word. You're talking about very hard-lined sociopaths, essentially. They're just these people. As far as I'm concerned, I don't like using the words, throwing around the word scum, but I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the 95% of politicians are scumbags. That's all there is. That's all there is to say about them. Really, they just don't care. They've got no compassion. They've got no empathy whatsoever. They don't. You're talking about people that. Not all, but a lot of them have come from well-to-do backgrounds. They've obviously come from some kind of wealth, or at least a family that's had a bit of success, or has done well for themselves somehow, and they've just played whatever games that they needed to play to get into a position of power, to give them leverage in order to be able to work their way into politics. So that God knows what a lot of these people have done and said, and how many people have fucked over the years to get into those kind of positions. I'm not saying everybody's got some hidden agenda or anything, or they're all malicious or anything. I'm not saying that, but I'd say the vast majority of them, at the very least, have no concept of doing the moral thing, sticking to their own. They're just followers. The vast majority of politicians are followers. They are not people that. A lot of them don't think for themselves. They'll toe the party line, the party narrative, for the sake of keeping their jobs, and out goes integrity and principles and values, that make a person a decent person. All of that shit goes out the window, and when you start targeting the most vulnerable people in your country to save a few £1 billion or dollars or whatever, you've got to ask yourself, who do these people work for? Who are these people protecting? Who are these people working alongside? Because it certainly isn't the public. These people are in the pockets of banks, big corporations, lobbyists, CEO types, hedge fund manager types, those kinds of people, dodgy, just sleazy, cutthroat types of people. That's what the government is. It's a cutthroat entity. It doesn't give a shit about you struggling to pay your bills, or you're not getting paid enough money for the amount of hours you put into your job, and they don't really care about your rights and improving things and making progression that benefits everyone. They've got their own narrative. They've got their own agenda. That's it's essentially, the government really is just it's there to keep its own. It's there to preserve itself. It's there to ensure that it keeps the power and control and the upper hand. To keep their cards close to their chest, to keep the ball in their court as much as possible for as long as possible, so that the average person can't really shake the foundations and change things. That's what it's there for. And it just tells you that something's gone horribly wrong when a government is supposed to be there to support in some ways, maybe not in every way, but in the very basics. The basic needs of its population. So once you get to a point where you're cherry picking groups that you deem to be doing things that are immoral, even though you've got no real evidence to support it. And meanwhile, you've got the people in the top echelons of society, including in the government, that are doing things far worse than people that they are targeting. Then you've got a very unequal balance of power. You've got a very it's a system built on and supportive of inequality. It's just that typical thing of, it's that dog eat dog thing. It's that screw people over for your own sake, and prey on the most vulnerable, the weakest in society. It's just like nature. It's like some some top predator going after some vulnerable, weak prey that's already injured. It's already debilitated. It's already kind of compromised in some way or other, and just going in for the last blow kind of thing. It's like they're just utter shitbags. I'm sorry. I really don't have any good thing. I really don't have really anything positive to say about government anymore. My trust has completely diminished. It really has. And the sooner more people wake up and realise that the government does not represent them, it does not have their interests at heart, it's not there to really improve things because they want to improve things. It's there. It's a cash cow. It's just a money making machine. It's just there to dictate the rules and maintain some kind of order in society. That's all it's really there for. It's that. Besides that, it's as far as I'm concerned, at least in the case of in England, at least, there's a lot of corrupt governments around the world, but as far as, I suppose you could make the argument all governments are corrupt in some fashion, or maybe that is kind of just part of it. What governments are at the core. It's an entity that's fueled by corruption, that's fueled by, it's just fueled by greed. It's fueled by serving those that they deem to, you know, it's there to help people that help them. Really, it's not there to help. It's not set up. You know, maybe in times gone by, you know, governments were somewhat better in supporting people. But I'd say certainly over the last 30 years or so, in terms of England at least, it's just become more and more. It's a kind of a fascist state, really. You know, it's become more of a combination of, you know, just one extreme to the other. It's like, you know, it's like kind of like fascist one minute and communist the next. It's really quite. And it's just really, really dangerous stuff, and it's not going to end in any healthy place. It's just making people lose. It's, you know, what they're doing is they're depleting any trust that people had in the government. You know, there was, after 14 years of the Conservatives in power, people were desperate for change, and of course Labour, you know, fed people a bunch of deception and lies to get into power, and all they've done since they were elected is just lie. That's it. That's all they've done. Just backtracked on everything, lied about everything. You know, giving money away to Ukraine, giving money away to other countries and foreign aid. You know, taking money away from pensioners, taking money away from, you know, the working man and woman, who's probably already struggling as it is thanks to inflation that the government seems to have no way of dealing with. So more and more things are getting expensive. There's more, the economy's in ruins. More and more people are leaving the country. Businesses are closing left, right, and centre, as I see it in the news all the time. Or at least they're cutting their staff numbers. And the government wants to pretend like there's some, you know, magical solution to all of this stuff by essentially kicking people off welfare, basically, or at least trying to. Because I think, you know, the bottom line is, if they could get away with it, and I've mentioned this a few times, but if they could get away with it, if they could find a way to completely do away with the welfare state, the welfare system, they would. I have absolutely no doubt about that at all. They would get rid of it tomorrow. But they know that it's a way of maintaining social order and control over people, especially now thanks to everything being done online and everything being digitally based these days, whereas it used to be that you could, you know, there was more kind of, you know, there was more freedom with things in the past. Now it's just there's just so much control over everything, you know, bundling all payments together and everything, and making it more difficult thanks to, you know, everything going online, and there's nobody you can really speak to anymore. You can't just walk into a job centre anymore like you used to. Essentially, England, I'd say over the last 25, 30 years, I'd say it's turned into, you know, England's essentially turned into a kind of corporate model, really. It's turned into a very almost lawless state, really. It's just capitalism, globalism on steroids. It really is. It's fuck the local population, the native people of this country, and support everybody else, because we know that those people are going to prop up an economy for a short period of time. Really, the reality is that the economy is dying. We're just trying to manage its decline, really. There's no incentive, there's no real investment in creating new jobs, especially in the most run-down, economically deprived parts of the country. I mean, even in parts of London now, it's not only crime that's on the rise, but unemployment is as well. It's just you've got a rising population. You've got a few thousand people adding to the population of the country every week, thanks to a government seems hell-bent on allowing, almost legalising, illegal crossings from France to England via the English Channel. And so you've got a population that's rising all the time, just naturally anywhere. But then you add into it, as well. And we're expecting that somehow everyone's magically going to have a decent, or at least a tolerable job in the next few weeks, months, or years while Labour's in power. It's just not going to happen. It's a complete pipe dream. It's pie in the sky. It's cloud nine bullshit. What this is really about, as far as I can tell, is this: they need money to start to help pay for to try and mitigate the costs of these illegal crossings that are happening every day or every other day. And so the government's thinking, well, how do we get money? We've already stretched as far as we can with the money that we've got. So they've got to make cuts somewhere. They've got to make savings somewhere, or rather prioritise money elsewhere. And so what do? They pick on the most vulnerable in society. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying that the welfare system didn't need to have some kind of reform to it. It's obvious that for the last few decades, there's been a handful of people that have been playing the system and been getting away with things, and at a time where there were more jobs. But unfortunately, I'd certainly say of the last 10 years or so, things have got terrible. Things have got really seriously bad as far as employment opportunities go, and employment rights and all that kind of stuff. And things have just got so bad that a lot of people now are either having to, it doesn't surprise me why crime's going up. It doesn't surprise me, because people are turning to crime as a way of making money, and that's what's going to happen more and more now. The government don't realise what they've just done. All people are going to do now is just turn to crime. Because the reality is that there is not enough work for everybody. That is just a fact. That's the truth of it. So when Labour say that so many people are being taken advantage of the system, and yeah, they're right. They are right to some extent. That some people have, but I don't think that the way to incentivise people is to stigmatise and demonise people for being on welfare. I don't think that's really the right way to deal with it. You've got to incentivise people to get into work. You've got to make employment. Well, firstly, you've got to make sure that there's enough employment available for people, especially for those who've struggled to get into employment. It's not you can't just. You're not just going to magically wave a wand and 1 million or 2 million people are going to suddenly be in work overnight. That's not going to happen. In fact, it probably won't happen while Labour's in power. The economy's in shreds. I don't know what Labour think. I genuinely do not know what their logic is behind this, because it's just going to backfire. It's not. I can see it in the short term, but in the long term, all this is just going to do is just going to breed more and more resentment, more and more distrust, and we'll see. Labour, all they're going to do is see themselves out of power for over 14 years or so. That's all they're doing. They're just they're just shooting themselves in the foot. It's all good and well taking money away from people that have got serious issues. The problem is that there's not enough decent work out there for everybody. Not everybody's going to have a career. Not everybody's going to have a decent job. And so those people are essentially left on the scrappy. Those people are essentially put on, mindless, soul-crushing, pointless, placements and so-called training schemes, where they essentially leave with less brain matter than they had when they arrived at these places, because of just how dumbing down everything is, and how they try to ruin your confidence, whatever you had of it to begin with. And that's essentially all they're going to do. All this is essentially is when they say they're going to get people back into training and education and employment, what they really mean is that they're going to increase more and more of these agencies, more and more of these schemes. They're going to make it. It's essentially trying to criminalise being on benefits. And what this is, as far as I can tell, there's a number of reasons behind this. One, it's because of the failures of the Conservatives to deal with the economy for the last 15 years. Two, it's the cost of the pandemic that threw a spanner in the works. And if there was any chance of the economy recovering before pandemic, once the pandemic struck, it was basically game over. The country was doomed. It's finished. You only have to look at the high street, and the economy's dead. It's been dead for about 20 years. It's just there's a reason why people are moving to places like Dubai and Portugal, and over here to parts of Southeast Asia, or heading off to Australia or Canada or wherever, because it's becoming a country that's hollowed out. There's nothing there for young people anymore. It's one thing if you're retired and you've got a decent pension, and it's like you've got you live in a kind of better area, nice part of the country, moving towards the Midlands or towards the south or whatever. Or maybe in southwest part of the country. Or you've somehow, you've accumulated some wealth or something because you're doing business overseas, or you've got some company overseas or something, and you can afford to kind of live between two countries or something. That it's like you can tolerate it. But for the average person, that is not the case. That's not their reality. Their reality is they see things getting more and more expensive as time's going by. More and more things are getting taken away. There's less freedom. There's essentially being pushed towards extinction almost. You're being pushed towards becoming the minority in a few short decades. And you can see just how the government's prioritising people that have no right to be in the country by flooding them with taxpayers' money just to rub salt into the wound, and giving them money that they have. Not only do they not have the right to be in the country, they certainly do not have any right to have access to any of the money that they didn't earn. It's one thing to have a welfare state there for people who actually need it, but then to go one step further along and say that taxpayers' money is somehow, that these people are somehow entitled, privileged enough because they've come from some or say that they've come from some difficult circumstances, even though most of them probably haven't. Most of them are just opportunists, and I want just a single fucking one of them, quite frankly. Things have just got so terribly bad that, and they're just getting worse and worse and worse over there. That I think at some point, I think people are going. I know I've talked about it multiple times, but there surely must come there has to be a breaking point at some point, some stage in the coming months, years. There must be. I mean, I don't know how much more people are going to tolerate this before something eventually snaps and chaos erupts. How much more are people expected to take? Just everything's against you in that country. There's too much legislation about everything. There's too much bureaucracy. There's too much hyper sensitivity, and this endless stream of you're guilty because you're white. You need to shut up and tolerate these people coming from the third world for the sake of our globalist aims, even though it's making your life poor, it's going to make your life hell in a few decades from now. Unless you've got enough money to live somewhere where you're not going to see that many of them. But eventually, it's just you're talking about tolerating people that have vastly different ideologies, attitudes, values, if you can use that word, and you're expecting British people that have grown up in a very modern used to be democratic country with a lot more reserved, a lot more morally, ethically focused kind of, for the most part, upbringing in many ways, to tolerate people that are the complete opposite. It's a recipe for disaster, and anyone with 2 brain cells knows it. I'm not saying that the welfare system doesn't need some serious reform. Most people would admit that. Most people that have either been on welfare, including myself at times in the past when I lived in the UK, unfortunately, I saw people that probably didn't really deserve it. I wouldn't necessarily. I wouldn't stop them. I wouldn't just I wouldn't I wouldn't go to such an extent where you almost get to a point where you're criminalising being unemployed or being sick. I'm not saying that you shouldn't deal with people that are exploiting the system. Of course you should, but that is not the vast majority of people, and that's what this is. It's this generalisation that because the statistics are showing that more people have claimed disability and universal credit since the pandemic, that there's more people playing the system. It's nothing to do with that. What's happened is that the economy is shrinking, and there's hardly any growth in the economy, and so people are basically utterly just giving up. That's what's happened. People are giving up, and because of the cost of living way, it's not worth taking a job, because you're going to end up being poorer. You're not going to be able to pay your bills. You're not going to be able to afford to pay your rent. Then of course people are going to turn to benefits. Of course, it's of your doing. It's because of you. It's because of your failure to deal with the deindustrialisation of the country. It's because of your failure that everybody else has to suffer, as is always the case. Always the vulnerable that face the consequences of government, people in power's incompetence, inadequacies of enacting policies that actually would make things better for people. Instead of allowing people to sit on benefits for 30 years, maybe you should have invested in more opportunities for people, more opportunities for people to have affordable education, affordable training, affordable apprenticeships. Actually make apprenticeships, viable for people, not just young people, but people in their 20s, people in their 30s that've still got time to train, and 40s, even 50s. You still got time to learn things, but it's not there. It's too close-minded. You've got fucking idiots. You've got morons running the fucking show, and that's all we've had for decades. The elite, the Oxford, Cambridge types of people, the middle class, the upper classes, making all the rules and decisions for everybody else, thinking that they've got it all figured out. They know what's best for everybody. They've got all the magical solutions to all of the economic problems, all the social problems, all the cultural problems. And they haven't. It's just that what it is that they've had a globalist agenda for the past 50 or so years, and it's screw everybody else, and everybody else can deal with the collateral. They are the collateral damage, and they're going to deal with the consequences of all that. They couldn't give a shit. They don't care, because they don't have to suffer the consequences of the things that they enact, or the failures of the policies that they enact. They don't care. Why would they care? They don't have to. They go back to the nice cushy little homes with 2-3 fucking cars in the driveway. Probably a few holiday homes. A lot of money in the bank. Kids in some private schools. Why would they give a shit about the average person going to some rundown, comprehensive school and not being able to afford to either go to university or pay off the bills once they're finished? Not having enough job opportunities, training opportunities, not being able to really afford to go to college or pay for it afterwards. They don't care, and even what it's about is it's about empowering people. It's about motivating people. It's about inspiring people. That's the problem in the UK. There's not enough of that shit. It's just run you into the ground. It's you better get a job. You better do this when you leave school. There's no confidence in people. There's no belief in you. It's just, all it is this passive aggressive belittling, just ignorance about everything, and oh, God forbid you have any aspirations. Oh no, I don't think you should have aspirations. I think you should go work in that factory. And that's the problem. It's partly parents' fault as well. This blind loyalty to social class. I don't want you doing any better than me. I don't want you ruining my face in that kind of attitude. That's part of the problem in England as well. You've got to give people belief in themselves, that they can achieve something, that they can do something. But you've got to be a mentor. That's what people need. People need mentors. People need guidance when they're young, so that they can avoid the pitfalls of bad choices. In later in life, and people need to have role models. If you're just gonna, how does that help people? How does that give anybody any confidence or bring back any self-esteem by cutting funding, by going into austerity measures? How does that deal with anything? Like, you've got enough money to send over to fucking places like India and China. You've got enough money to send over to fucking Ukraine to fund the war for the last few years. You've got enough money to send over a country to invest in their space program and all this shit. It's like, what our fucking country? What about money that we need in our country? They're sending it off to some fucking third world shithole. Let's spend it on our country for once. I don't know. It's a radical idea. How about trying to sort the fucking problems out in our own country for once in our goddamn lives? Fucking makes me sick. It's like, yeah, root out the problems of people exploiting social, welfare and all that kind of stuff. People pretending that they're sick and all that. Yeah, great, that's all good and well, but that doesn't really solve anything either. Because all you, like I said before, all you're going to end up with is people turning to crime. So the population, prison population is going to go up. So they're going to have to spend more and more money to build new prisons to fit everybody in. It's just this government is probably one of the most disastrous, ineffective, inefficient governments I've ever known in my entire fucking life. Seriously, it's fucking disgusting. No, let's not tax the rich, and let's not, take a little bit of money off them, even though the fucking multi-million pound, wealthy, never gonna go broke, never gonna be hungry, never gonna suffer types. Don't bother with that. The people that could pay a little bit more into the economy. Let's not bother, dealing with tax avoidance by big corporations, and let's not deal with the corruption in government where money's being mismanaged, and we're having to keep borrowing money and asking the public to keep paying more and more and more and more and more and more fucking taxes every year. Let's not bother with that. Let's not bother with dealing with things properly, because I don't care. It's predator versus prey. That's all the government is. That's how the government see the vast majority of the people that they're supposed to serve, especially the working classes. They don't give a shit, and they expect to have any kind of confidence in it, any trust in them when it comes to getting elected. I hope nobody ever has any fucking shred of faith in government ever again. Seriously. As far as I'm concerned, get fucking rid of these bastards. These unscrupulous, fucking greedy, self-serving garbage that is Labour, Conservatives, Liberal Democrats, fucking all of them. Just get rid of all of them. We need something new. We need a new system. We need something radical. We need to get rid of all this corruption, all this smoke and mirrors, all these lies, all this manipulation, these double standards. We've got to get people back to work. Okay, so what's your solution? Well, we're going to cut benefits. Okay, so how does that get people back into work? If anything, that means that because of the way that things are in the economy at the moment, well, most of those people aren't going to get back into work. So it's you're just fiddling the books. That's all you're going to do. You're trying to fiddle the books, fiddle the statistics, fiddle the numbers, to make it look like you're doing something effective. That's all it is. Because you want to make it look like the economy's growing, that you're doing something to improve the finances of the country so you can get elected again. That's all that really is. These people are the most disingenuous, deceitful. These people are the most narcissistic, horrible fucking scumbags you'll ever know. Oh, there might be decent people to their children, to their family. Of course they are. But once they're put on their uniform and go to work that day, they couldn't give a fuck about anybody else. They don't care about you. They don't give a shit. They don't care about what you're going through. They just want your money. That's all they want. Your money, more of it every year. That's why when people say that people like George Carlin were like really pessimistic and like doom. Maybe he was like the first doomer. I don't know, but he was right. He was right. That's why I like watching people like George Carlin and Bill Hicks, because they were fucking spot on. They saw through it all early on. They saw through all this shit. It's all a fucking con. It's all a massive scam. You're not there to govern at all. You're there to take as much money as you can possibly get from the people with the least, and leave them in debt for their entire lives. Meanwhile, you'll fucking get richer, and you can afford that new home you like by the ocean. Meanwhile, everybody else is fucking stuck, fucking penny pinching, counting the fucking coins on the table, trying to put a little bit away so they can afford to keep a bloody roof over their heads, afford a bit of food for the kids. They don't give a fuck about that. And then they wonder why people riot and fucking lose their temper and why people lose their fucking minds and do crazy shit. That's why, because you fucking drive them into the ground. You drive them to the point of insanity. You drive them to desperation. But that's what they want. That's exactly what they want. Because they want to bring in a new area of control. Every aspect of your life is under constant surveillance. You say one thing out of line, you do one thing out of line, that's it. Suddenly your bank account's frozen, suddenly your money, your investments have gone. That's what they want, some kind of social credit system. That's what we're heading towards. That's what all this is a gradual move towards it. That's partly what this whole benefits cut thing is. It's a slow progressive march towards a social credit system in which you're just a number, basically. It's like a kind of 21st century version of Auschwitz almost, or something like that, where you're given just about enough to survive on, and meanwhile you get treated like absolute crap. Because they don't want you to have any ability to think for yourself. They don't want you to have any power, any willpower, any ideas of how to change things, any leverage in society, any ability to ask questions and to point out all the flaws, all the unfairness of it all. They don't want that. They want you to shut the fuck up, go to work every day, pay your fucking taxes, and fuck off and die, basically. They don't want you getting a pension. They don't want you having any savings. They want you to fuck off. They see you as leeches. They see you as a pest. If they had their way, they'd have a fucking mass extinction tomorrow. That's the problem. There's too many people, not enough jobs, not enough money going around, and they're just they're having to prop up the economy with debt, basically. It's everywhere you look, there's corruption. Everywhere. Really pisses me off. You could have fucking sorted this shit out 30 years ago. Make it, maybe, I don't know, try and increase the numbers of people going to university, but making it affordable, even free for certain people, to go to university and college, to make it, increase the availability, the opportunities for people to go into training and apprenticeships as they get even into their adulthood, so they're just being available for teenagers. How about dealing with 0-hour contracts, part-time work, dodgy agencies, all this shit? increasing the minimum wage to an actual level where you can actually afford to live, dealing with inflation, increasing investments and funding in employment opportunities, in new businesses, in new sectors, industries. Nah, let's not do any of that. Let's not bother with that. Let's blame it all on the unemployed. Let's blame it all on the sick and vulnerable and disabled and people with serious mental health problems, because that's all their fault, isn't it? It's all down to them. That's why everything is the way it is. Even though it's your fucking shitbag mates in government who've fucking crashed the economy multiple times over the last 50 years and have allowed fucking millions of people from God knows where in to fucking create a black market that you can't deal with. Now the country's flooded with illegals, flooded with drugs, flooded with counterfeit God knows what. Fucking infested with crime now, infested with communist rhetoric, ideology crap for the last 10 years or so, 20 years maybe even. Countries spiralling out of control thanks to increasing debt. Things closing left, right and centre. And you wonder why so many people want to leave the country. Really? Really? You're surprised by that, are you? I'm surprised people out there outside Houses of Parliament fucking hurling rocket launchers and grenades at the fucking building and targeting bloody politicians' homes. I'm not a violent person, but I mean, I'm surprised it hasn't happened, and the way things are going, that's what's going to happen. I don't want it to happen, but that's where we're going. That's the way things are headed. People are going to fucking revolt. People are going to get violent at some stage. People are going to fucking snap. Things keep getting more and more expensive, and you aren't dealing with things by balancing, mitigating things properly. Then at some point, people will say, we've got nothing left. We've got nothing to lose. We're going to have to resort to different tactics and different means of trying to sort this out, because we can't afford to live. We can't afford to feed our kids. We can't afford to save for retirement. We can't afford a holiday anymore. Once you start fucking with people's lives like that, people are going to just say, I've got nothing left and I don't give a fuck what happens. I don't care about the consequences. Let's fucking go out there and revolt and smash shit up. Now, I don't call for things I don't support people being violent and aggressive. But that's the way things are going to go. I'm telling you now, it's a fact. We've seen it throughout history. We know that's when people get desperate, people do things like that. So, at some stage, people will get tired of hearing all the excuses. People will get tired of hearing all the bullshit rhetoric. The constant slander and smearing, guilt tripping because you're white and you come from, a developed or supposed to be a developed country. What used to be a democratic nation that has been anything but that for the past 20 years. When you can't even deal with your own fucking borders. What does that tell you? It tells you that the country's fucking lost. It's finished. It's gone. If you can't even do the very basic things of protecting your own, defending your own country against people you have got no idea about, then there's no hope for that country. There's just no hope for it. You can keep propping it up with borrowed money, and you can keep, making up lies and excuses to the public so you can keep getting elected. But eventually, there's going to become a point where people see through all this crap, which people are starting to, thankfully. And people are going to wake up and say, "Look, we've got to stop doing the things we've been doing for the past few decades. We can't go on like this. This is not. We're all getting poorer. We're not poor, but we're getting poorer. think about the life you used to have 30, 40 years ago, and look at where we are now. Can barely afford to go anywhere. Even a local holiday, everything's getting more and more expensive. It's becoming less and less and less and less pleasant in the UK. It really is. It was getting bad when I was there in 2015, when I still lived there. That's why I left, because I saw. I'm sorry to say this about my country, but it's become an absolute shithole because of shitty, nasty, horrible people in government that have an agenda, and they've got to see it through no matter what, because they're reliant upon money coming from elsewhere. That's what all this is really about. England is a small country. It doesn't have enough resources, doesn't have enough money to sustain itself. So what is it doing? It's borrowing money from other places, probably from America, probably from the EU. So of course I didn't want to leave the EU, because there's so much investment, so much money involved in it. And that's all this is ever about. It's money. That is the bottom line of it. We need money for this. Well, when we're going to get it? But we can't just keep borrowing money. Well, we're going to have to make cuts on that. We're going to have to make savings so we can move that money elsewhere. And that's all this is. That's all this is about with this whole new package of welfare reforms and all this stuff. That's it. That's all it is. It's not about doing anything moral. Like these people give a fuck about morals. I mean, I've got, out of all the political parties as well, Labour, really? Labour, the party that was supposed to be there for the more, the downtrodden, the struggling working classes kind of thing. This is what it used to be there for. It's just, all it is now, it's just become an increasingly cutthroat capitalist society. That's what England has become. It's essentially a kind of mini America, if you like. It's a kind of mini corporate entity with so many shareholders, i.e. Ukraine, the EU, God knows where else. And I don't like swearing particularly, but I just find it infuriating. It just fills me with rage, because I see through it. I know what's going on here. And so do other people. But the problem is what can you do? What can you actually genuinely do? Yeah, you can write complaints to the government, but they don't care. They're not going to do anything. The power to play along, to keep things in check, to keep your position in government, to keep that nice little cushy number salary coming in, that's too strong. So they're not doing. You're talking about people that have got no concept of morals and morality. It's obvious when you're part of a government that allows thousands of illegal people to cross into the country every day with no documents and God knows what history behind them and potentially criminal records. When you allow one particular religion to try and dominate over everything, where you allow one particular political philosophy to dominate over everything, to treat the working classes as the undeserving poor, to demonise them for asking for things, to demonise them for expecting better treatment. They don't give a fuck. They don't give a shit. And as soon as the fucking people wake up and smell the coffee and realise that governments do not give a fuck about them, Hopefully that's the point where things start to change. Nobody should ever again vote for Labour, the Conservatives or the Liberal Democrats. Never ever vote for these fuckers again. Well, you know, we were left with a difficult situation because of the last government. Yeah, but that's what everybody fucking says. They all say that. That's what the Conservatives said last time they were in power. Yeah, well, we had a difficult situation because of, you know, what we were left with Labour and because of the financial crash. And it's like, yeah, well, and it's your job to sort it out. If it means borrowing more money, then fucking borrow more money. Don't just steal people's money away from them at a time when they need that money the most. It's like it'd be one thing if they brought inflation down so it was more affordable to live. But they aren't doing that. Because they want people to die off. They want people to go hungry. They want people to be kept in poverty because it serves their financial interests. They want a certain part of the population in constant cycles of poverty, in a poverty trap. Because that's how you create wealth. That's how you get profit. They don't want everyone doing well, making money. Or if they do, it's everything that is under their control. It's, you know, you get money with your left hand, it gets taken away with the other. That's what the UK is. Get money in one hand, taken away with the other, all the time. That's why people find themselves trapped. Not enough jobs. There's not enough decent paying jobs. Too many jobs that are ruled by scandalous fucking agencies or companies breaking the rules, not following the rules properly, cutting corners, getting away with all sorts of stuff, not following employment laws, employment rights. People realising that they're not going to be able to really, you know, do anything with their lives because they're not getting paid enough money. But all you get is, well, it's their fault. You know, it's their fault that they didn't go to college. It's their fault they didn't go to university. It's their fault that they didn't have any aspirations. It's their fault that they can't manage the money. Well, then fucking put something in place to help them then. Help these fucking people. Help these people to sort themselves out. Instead of criminalising everything, do something productive, effective. Stop putting a sticky plaster over everything for decades on end. Because it doesn't fucking work. See, it's just all a business. That's what it's turned into. That's what government's turned into. It's just a huge profit-making business. That's it. It's just been ramped up as capitalism has gone amok, basically, and as globalism's took over the last 30 years or so. Things are just getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. Now, how can you? It's like, how can you do that to people? How can you? You know, I just scapegoating people that have clearly got issues. Well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Make them work for the benefits? Oh yeah, that's going to improve their chances, isn't it? That's going to increase their aspirations and ambitions in life. That's all it is in the UK. There's never any positive reinforcement over there of anything. Never is. It's always, you're bad because you do this. You're immoral because you do that. You're scum because you do this. You're a leech on society. You're a leech on taxpayers' money. Yeah, and how many taxpayers are benefiting from the benefit system as well? A lot of them get money from it as well. And as well, a lot of people that are unemployed have been in employment. So it's just always this constant parade of like guilt tripping, sticking a boot in your neck, telling you you're the problem, you're the enemy, you're the thing that's holding this country back. It's your problem, it's your fault. Well, really, it's the people who are actually in charge of things, making all decisions, that have got no ability to think ahead. They've got no ability to come up with any kind of economically viable framework or policies that actually have any real merit, that actually have any real long-term effects that benefit the poorest or the most vulnerable in society, or the people that need some help. But the thing is, they don't want. You see, this is what I'm saying. They don't want. They want the social class system to stay in place. It benefits them hugely. They don't want people climbing the social class ladder. They say they do, but they don't really, because that would mean less money for them. Because most of those people, if they had any sense, wouldn't live in a country like that. And they know that. They know that those people would leave the country, so they don't want that. They want to keep people in. They want to keep people literally just above the poverty line. Really, that's it. Where they make you suffer for being unemployed. They stick a label on you, stereotype you, stigmatise you, demonise you, belittle you, mock you, embarrass you for coming from difficult circumstances and a difficult upbringing. So that's not our fault. But it is though, isn't it? It is partly your fault, because you haven't addressed the issues properly and you've had plenty of time to do it. So it is partly your fault. Maybe not you specifically, but the party that you belong to. Or at least now you could be. You could be doing something now to address it, to deal with things. How about making work pay? That might be a good idea. So people don't have to rely on benefits when they're in work. How about some radical moves, some new thoughts, some new ideas, some fresh things? That increase people's sense of purpose, meaning in life, that give them a reason to want to get up and go to work because they like it, they enjoy it, they get fulfillment, they get some satisfaction out of it. To incentivise people to want to go and get a college degree or a university degree and to stay in education. But they don't want it, you see. They don't want everyone getting an education and getting skilled and getting trained. It's all a pack of lies. Because they need a certain amount of the population to either be in low paid employment, to be in low skilled jobs, or to be unemployed, because it's that is the component of their system that they need. To kind of balance the books, to balance things out for their own sake. Or even if they do want people to get back into work because they need the money else to use elsewhere, they're not really going to do anything that will deal with the deep-rooted issues of the country. They won't do that. All they'll do is what they've done for the past 20 years. And that is just, like I said, they'll just put you on these in fact, far longer than 20 years. It's been going on since the 70s. With these, post-school based, schemes and, so-called training pathways and all this crap. It doesn't really do anything for you. It doesn't add anything to your your chances of getting employment. Doesn't really add anything to your resume. It's just a way for them to say, look, more people are employed now, more people are in work. We're dealing with this, because that's all it really is in a way. It's just a way of convincing the public that they're doing something, that they're being, a proper government. We're rooting out the ills of society. We're rooting out the ills of poverty kind of thing. We're dealing with poverty traps by, helping people get back into education, training, and employment. Really, are you? Really? Because in my city alone, I haven't seen hardly any investment, any new factories being built, new warehouses, new companies going up. The high street being sorted out. I haven't seen any of that. And it's like from now and again, every now and again you might say, this enterprise thing's being developed. This is being put up here, but either it never gets off the ground, or it under, it's overestimated kind of thing. It's exaggerated, and it doesn't really provide as many jobs as it could do, or just something somewhere along the way stops its development or whatever. It's just the reality is this: the government doesn't have any solutions. They don't have any answers. That's what it is. They don't have any real answers to these problems. I think that's essentially what it comes down to. So what do? Well, we do what we've always done. We pick and choose who we feel are the ones that need to be put in place, stopped, dealt with. But all you're essentially doing really is, all you're doing is just creating more barriers. All you're doing is creating more problems by doing that. It's like, yeah, you might save a few £1 billion or whatever, but in the long run, in the long term, it won't resolve anything. It won't bring those people any benefits. It won't literally. It won't bring those people any. It won't. It doesn't. It's not going to help them step up. They're not going to get on any kind of ladder in society. They're not going to get on any kind of. They're not going to be elevated in any way. All of them just going to be done is just as always, just treat it as collateral damage. That's all it is. That's essentially what it is. As always, the people that need the most help, and I'm not just saying that everyone that's on welfare has got mental health problems or there's some disability. Of course not. But a lot of those people, I'd say the vast majority of them that aren't those things, need some kind of support, need some kind of help. And it's not even just about being physically or mentally handicapped in some way. Sometimes it's just about financial problems. It's like just limited opportunities. Going to rough schools, being brought up in socially deprived areas where you have the confidence knocked out of you early on, where you grew up in an area that's essentially been forgotten, and you think no one cares, and you just end up in this cycle of poor behaviours and a toxic lifestyle that you just grow up thinking is normal, and because of that you grow up with no sense, for the most part anyway. Most people grow up with no real sense of purpose, no sense of self-confidence, belief that they can do anything, they can achieve anything. And a lot of them end up, it becomes a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy kind of thing. It's because they see everything around them, they see no real investment, they see there's no respect for authorities anymore. You know, there's no real efforts. You know, people just looking down their noses at you. You know, you're the underclass, you're the undeserving types. You know, why do you deserve any money? Why should we give you anything? Or why do you do something for yourself? Oh, what if it? Well, we would if we had money to do it. But we don't. You know, we don't all grow up in privileged, entitled families. We don't all grow up in circumstances that are conducive to success and becoming entrepreneurs and, you know, well-to-do business types, you know, well-to-do career-orientated people. You know, not everyone's like that, and a lot of that time that comes down to, really, a lot of it's down to genetics, down to learned behaviour. It's down to the family that you grow up in, the context, the situation you're in, the people that you're around when you're younger, the class that you grow up in, the financial, you know, the socio-economic factors of it all. All these things matter. You know, just reduce these people to, you know, welfare exploiters. It's just fucking ridiculous. It's just a pathetic way. It's just such an ignorant, lazy approach to addressing what's really going on, because they don't care, and I think probably deep down they know that they can't deal with it, they can't address it. That's what it comes down to. The money that would be needed to sort all these things out, the things that would need to be done to sort these things out, they're not willing to do. They don't want to they don't deem it worthy enough to do it, because, like I said, they look down the noses at these people. It's like you're just scroungers, you know. You're just lazy, you know, just unmotivated ne'er-doers, you know, just people that don't deserve the time of day kind of thing, which is just, obviously, that's criminal. That's and yeah, I agree to some extent. You know, there were certainly some very minorities, a very small number of people that are like that. You know, people that ruin people's lives, that commit horrible crimes, and people genuinely actually people who are taking the piss and doing things that most people would disagree with. But the vast majority of people aren't like that. They're just trying to get by. They're just trying to survive as best as they can. That's all it is. Any kind of morally based government outlook on treating their population, or the most disillusioned, dissatisfied, unfulfilled parts of the population because of a lack of economic opportunities, financial opportunities, those things went out the window a long time ago. Once people realised that they could make a living, you know, make a business out of keeping people poor, keeping people ill, keeping people ignorant, then it was just game over for a lot of people. It was just, you know, you can't even, you know, when you think about, like, the scientific community, you know, the healthcare industry, medicine, and you can't even trust a lot of the stuff you read. You know, when all the bullshit of advertising, marketing, all that crap, it's just you just, you know, and funding not going where it's supposed to go. You know, funding not getting approved for certain research into, you know, serious diseases and conditions and disorders and whatever. It's just what can you say? You know, we're ruled by. I'm not saying that there aren't some decent people in government. Yeah, I'm sure there are some people that do have some values and principles and morals. But I'd say, there are people who do try to change things and try to raise awareness of things, but the powers, the vast majority of people are just too willing to play the game, because they just toe the line. Keep towing the line, keep your mouth shut, keep burying your head in the sand. Just do whatever you got to do, say whatever you got to say to keep your job, to keep up that nice little middle class lifestyle I've got. Most people in government, they don't care. It's just the truth. They just don't care. They don't think about inequity, inequalities in terms of the local population struggling. They don't care about those people. They don't give a fuck. You see, it's all your own fault. You brought it all on yourselves. It's not our problem. You're too demanding. You're too defeatist. Blah blah blah. And the reason for that is because of those very people. They brought it. They created this monster. They created these problems, and now they're running scared because they don't know how to deal with it. So, what's the quick fix? Well, just take money away. Take money away. That'll sort it out. That'll do everything. Take money away from them. That'll get them back into work. Once they can't afford to pay the rent bills. So is there enough opportunities there? You're actually going to address the issues of trying to get people that are actually disabled and mentally unwell into jobs that they have no place being involved with. You're gonna change the law and everything to make sure that all of that's legal and above board? Nah, of course not. You're gonna regulate things to make sure that things are done fairly, properly, legally? Nah, of course you're not. You're going to actually increase the number. You're actually going to make sure that there's enough investment and funding and construction going into building, facilities, whatever you want people to work in. Nah, of course you're not going to do that. So what you've got is you've got a limited number of crappy shit opportunities, if you can even call them opportunities, where you've got an increasing number of people fighting for those things, including a lot of people that don't have disabilities and mental health problems, and including obviously fresh graduates, whatever. And now we're going to add it. You're going to make it even more competitive. It's essentially what it is. It's just more and more capitalism, more and more competition for less and less benefit, for less and less fulfillment. And I just think eventually. You're just gonna. This is why you're gonna see some far right party get into power in the coming decades, in my opinion. I think people are heading towards that now. People are seeing just how much of a liberty these fuckers in power are taking, how much they are abusing their authority, abusing their positions, lying people, deceiving people. To not only get into power, but then to stay in power. And going back on everything that they promised to the electorate. Just very, very sad. I say that so many times over and over, virtually every day. It's just sad. It's just so true. So demoralising. So. So disappointing. It really is. People that could actually change things for the better, could do things that would benefit people, even if it meant spending more money. If you can't trust those people to do things, to make the right choices, to do the moral thing, once you prioritise money over morality, it's game over.